Hello everyone. Welcome back to Uncle Bod Dewey's Ghost Story YouTube channel. Wishing everyone an exciting time listening to ghost stories. Dewey sincerely thanks everyone very much. Before diving into the ghost story, don't forget to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel to support Dewey. Now, let's begin with the first story of the day. This story was shared by a young man. He mentioned that his aunt, who currently resides in District 9, has a husband, his uncle, who works as a contractor building swift-let houses. This means his uncle often has to travel to different places to supervise construction projects for swift-let farming houses. As a result, his uncle is rarely home, usually away for about a month at a time. During the recent Lunar New Year, his uncle had to travel to Quang Binh for a swift-let house project. Since it was a long trip, his uncle was worried about leaving his aunt and their young child alone at home. So, he asked the young man to stay with his aunt for a while until he returned. At that time, the young man wasn't too busy, so he agreed to stay with his aunt in District 9 until his uncle came back. Previously, whenever he visited his aunt's house in District 9, nothing unusual ever happened. However, this time was different. It was the experience that made him decide to return to Siam Mao in a hurry, as fast as an ex-lover leaving, as he jokingly put it. In the first 2 or 3 days after moving in, nothing strange occurred. Since he thought it was his aunt's house, he didn't feel the need to ask for permission from any unseen spirits. His aunt, although originally from the Mekong Delta region of Siam Mao, had converted to Catholicism after marrying his uncle, who is from central Vietnam. Because of this, she no longer practiced traditional rituals or believed in spiritual matters. During those first few days, his friends came over to hang out, drink, and party late into the night. He would end up passing out from drinking, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. However, in the days following, when his friends stopped coming over, he became more sober, and that sobriety brought fear. He started to wonder if his aunt had ever experienced anything unusual in the house. But for him, it was around 3 a.m. each night that things began to happen. Your dream often features a person wearing white clothes who comes and kicks you. The moment they kick you, you wake up startled and disoriented. When you check the clock, it's always 3 a.m. You think it might be because you frequently listen to ghost stories on Dewey's channel during the day, leading to overthinking and hallucinations at night. You didn't dwell on it much and went about your day as usual. The next evening, after gaming and chatting with friends, you went to sleep around 1 a.m. That night, you had the same dream again. This time, you clearly saw the person, a man wearing shiny white pajamas. He stood in front of you, raised his leg to kick you, and even spoke, saying, "Leave." Did you ask anyone for permission to stay here? Wake up and go somewhere else. You woke up suddenly and checked the clock. It was only 1:45 a.m. You were frustrated, thinking you had only slept for 45 minutes. Yet the dream felt so real, as if the man had been standing next to you, scolding you. You also started thinking about the place where you were sleeping. It was right under a statue of Jesus Christ and a picture of Father Trong Bu Deep. Being Catholic, you didn't believe you could encounter such things in your sleep. You tried to go back to sleep, but that night, something strange happened. You hadn't turned on the fan or air conditioning. You rarely use fans, yet the room felt freezing cold. Your entire body was chilled, as if the air conditioner was on. Feeling too cold, you grabbed a blanket and covered yourself, leaving only your eyes uncovered. By chance, you glanced toward the door and saw several dark shadows outside. There were so many that they crowded together, standing right at the door as if they wanted to come inside but didn't cross the threshold. You thought it might have something to do with the rosary bracelet you were wearing. You had gotten it from a temple because you often see spirits and had asked for protection. However, that night, you were only wearing one bracelet, as your sibling had borrowed the other. You forced yourself to sleep until morning. The next day, you told your aunt about the shadows you saw near the door. She advised you to buy some offerings like rice, salt, and cakes to place outside and pray for them. You followed her advice and made the offerings. However, you completely forgot about the man in the white pajamas from your dream. That night, you were too scared to sleep alone, so you went to your aunt's room, and the two of you slept together. This time, Even though you were sleeping in the same room as your aunt, it was also the moment you decided to leave. You gathered your belongings and left in the middle of the night. The reason you wanted to go back to your hometown immediately was because as soon as you laid down, you saw him again. Even though your aunt was in a room with you, you were the only one who could see him. He was standing right at the head of your bed, and his face looked terrifying. You thought to yourself that he wasn't just a ghost anymore. He had become a demon. His face was horrifyingly grotesque, filthy as if it hadn't been washed in years, covered in dirt and grime. His eyes were pitch black, just like something out of a Chinese horror movie. The sight of him scared you to the core. He leaned in close to your face and spoke in a chilling voice. "This guy is really stubborn. Why haven't you left after I chased you away for 2 days? Do you believe I'll break your neck and kill you right here?" That night, you clearly saw his entire form and face, unlike the previous times. Since you were lying down, he was standing at the head of your bed, leaning in so that his face was directly in front of yours. You could see every detail of his horrifying face. It was dirty and grimy, as if it hadn't been cleaned in years, and his black, soulless eyes were especially terrifying. You were so scared that you woke up with a jolt. When you checked the clock, it was just past 1 a.m. At that moment, you were overwhelmed with fear and haunted by the image of that man. You immediately packed your things, grabbed your backpack, and started to leave. Your aunt noticed and asked, "What are you doing? Are you sleepwalking?" You didn't say much and just told her, "Auntie, let's pack up and go back to the countryside for the new year. We can come back after the holiday, but you should reconsider staying in this house." Your aunt was surprised and tried to stop you, saying, "It's so late. Where are you going?" You replied that you were going to your uncle's house, which was only about 2 kilometers away, to spend the night. Despite the late hour, your aunt decided to go with you for safety. The next morning, everyone asked you what had happened, but you didn't explain. You just said, "Let's go back to the countryside for the new year, and I'll tell you everything then." After that, you packed up and returned to CA Mao to prepare for the holiday. 2 or 3 days later, your aunt and uncle also went back to the countryside. Once you were all back, you finally had the courage to tell your aunt about the dreams and experiences you had in her house. However, she didn't believe you, saying, "We have a statue of Jesus and a picture of Father Deep in the house. How could something like that happen? It's impossible." After hearing her response, another relative, who used to play chess with your grandfather, asked your aunt, "Your family follows Christianity and worships a statue of Jesus, but when you brought the statue home, did you perform the proper consecration ceremony?" Your aunt was surprised by the question and replied, "We follow the faith and brought the statue home, but we didn't perform any consecration." The act of opening the eyes, or consecration, is like awakening the spirit of a statue. I didn't really know much about it, so I just brought the statue home to worship. Then my uncle said something that left me speechless. He explained, whether you are Buddhist or Christian, when you bring a Buddha or Christ statue home for blessings, you must perform the consecration ritual. Don't expect blessings just by bringing the statue home without this ritual. Without it, the statue is just a clay figure with painted features, and worshiping it holds no meaning. After hearing this, my aunt realized that all this time, she had only been worshiping an inanimate object. However, she still didn't fully believe in spiritual matters or the idea of ghosts. One time, she returned to her home after celebrating Lunar New Year in the countryside for about a month. On the 16th day, she came back to the house to prepare for a grand opening ceremony. The house had been empty for the entire month. That night, her husband cleaned the house, and their young son slept in the same room as his parents. Suddenly, the boy screamed, "Dad, I see an old man standing outside our door, staring into the room. His face looks so scary." Everyone looked but saw no one. This reminded her husband of the story she had heard before, making them suspect there might be a spirit in the house. The next morning, my aunt and her husband immediately went out to buy fruits and offerings to perform a ritual. They also went to the landlord to ask about the house's history. At first, the landlord didn't understand, but when my aunt described the old man's appearance, the landlord suddenly remembered and said, "If he looks like that, it must be my grandfather's spirit." He passed away in this house. Back then, my younger brother wanted to sell the house, but my grandfather didn't agree. They argued, and my grandfather became so upset that he passed away here. After that, we couldn't sell the house and could only rent it out. It seems my grandfather's spirit hasn't moved on, and since you didn't ask for permission to live here, he's probably upset and playing tricks on you. After hearing this, even though my aunt and her husband were Christians, they invited a spiritual master to perform a ritual, apologize to the spirit, and pray for peace so they could live and work in harmony. In another story, a woman shared that her grandmother had 6 children. However, one of her grandmother's children had passed away at a young age. This child, who had died young, was her uncle, younger than her father. Despite his early passing, when he was still very young, he often followed family members around and never reincarnated. Specifically, he frequently followed your father because, according to your grandmother, he loved your father very much. He would always follow him, and one notable instance was when your father and grandfather worked in the fields. After returning home at noon, they would nap on the porch. Every time your father lay down to rest on the porch, your uncle would appear, sitting as a dark figure on your father's chest. This happened repeatedly, making it hard for your father to breathe. Your uncle would sit on his chest, giggling and playfully teasing your father, persistently inviting him to go along with him. After some time, your father moved to Buonma, Thuat for work and eventually got married to your mother there. During that period, your great-grandfather, who practiced spiritual rituals, knew that your uncle continued to follow your father to Buonma Thuat. Aware of this, your great-grandfather advised your father and uncle to set up an altar for the uncle. Following this advice, your father established an altar, and afterward, no further incidents occurred. Years later, when you were born and grew up, an incident happened one day close to the Lunar New Year. Around that time, families often cleaned and tidied up graves in preparation for the holiday. On that particular day, your parents went to the family cemetery to clean, and you asked to go along. By the time the cleaning was done, it was already late afternoon, around 4 or 5 p.m. Everyone was tired and hungry, so your mother asked you to go to a nearby grave, which belonged to a family member, to retrieve a plate of food that had been offered earlier. Before taking the food, you politely said, "Please let me take this plate of food. I'll bring another one to replace it later." You thought it was a simple and respectful gesture since it was food offered to the deceased. After bringing the food back, everyone ate together and returned home. However, by the 25th day of the Lunar New Year, you began to show signs of illness. You started coughing persistently, feeling as if something was scratching your throat, making it unbearably itchy unless you coughed. The coughing became so severe that you even coughed up blood. Concerned, your family took you to the hospital, where doctors examined you and prescribed medication. After taking the medicine for a day or two, your coughing slightly improved, but then you started experiencing severe headaches. Notably, these headaches intensified around 11 p.m. to midnight, feeling as though someone was hammering your head. This unbearable pain persisted until around 2 a.m. each night. You returned to normal again, but you don't remember anything that just happened. Then you notice the food you had asked your parents to buy for you, but you can't eat it. Just looking at it makes you feel nauseous, and you can't eat or drink anything at all. This condition lasted throughout the entire Lunar New Year season. Everyone around you started seeing you as if you were a demon, and rumors spread that you had gone mad. You felt very sad during this time, but the constant pain in your body every day didn't allow you to focus on anything else. At this point, your parents began to wonder if it had something to do with the promise you made at the graveyard, to offer something to the spirit there that you had forgotten to fulfill. Thinking this might be the reason, your parents brought an offering to the grave as a way to make amends. However, nothing changed, and you continued to suffer as before. A day or two later, your grandmother from Saigon came to visit. Luckily, she was a Buddhist nun living in a temple. When she stayed over and slept in the same room as you, you felt completely normal, no headaches or pain. Unfortunately, she only stayed for one day as she had to return to Saigon for work. After she left, your symptoms returned, and you were still not back to normal. Seeing how strange this was, your parents decided not to take you to the hospital anymore, but instead brought you to see a monk. When you arrived, the monk asked why there were 4 people present when, in reality, it was only you and your parents. The monk saw another person that you couldn't see. Your mother explained that only 3 people had come, but the monk insisted there was a 4th presence. The monk then asked your mother if she had ever abandoned a child. Your mother denied it, saying she had never done such a thing. The monk then asked if anyone in your family, either on your father's or mother's side, had lost a child at a young age. He mentioned seeing a small spiritual presence lingering around your house. At this point, your parents admitted that they were aware of a spirit, your uncle's spirit, that always seemed to follow him. The monk explained that the reason you were suffering from throat pain and headaches was because of this male spirit. During the Lunar New Year, your family had not performed proper offerings for this spirit, only doing it in a rushed and careless manner without burning items for him. As a result, the spirit had no clothing or items in the afterlife and became angry, causing you to suffer. The spirit had scratched your throat and caused the unbearable headaches as a form of revenge. After examining your case, the monk said he could help, but you would need to stay at his temple for 2 or 3 days for him to perform the necessary rituals. However, the monk had to leave for Ben Din for some work, so you were left at his place. While waiting for the monk to return, your symptoms continued. You suffered from coughing and severe headaches. When the monk returned, he prepared a special type of alcohol infused with spiritual blessings and rituals. After drinking it, your symptoms disappeared and you finally recovered. This girl shared a story for fun, which was told to her by her uncle. The story involved a friend of her uncle named Fook. At that time, Fook had a girlfriend named Nu. While Nu was still in 12th grade, Fook was working as a server at a karaoke bar. Everything would have been fine if not for the fact that there was another woman at the karaoke bar named Nak, who had a strong liking for Fook. Nak often confessed her feelings to Fook, but he firmly rejected her because he already had a girlfriend. Although Nu did not work with him, Fook remained loyal. After several failed attempts to win Fook's heart, Nak acted as though she had accepted the situation and decided to be just friends with him. One day, Nak requested a few days off to return to her hometown to handle some personal matters. A few days later, after returning to the karaoke bar, Nak invited Fook and his girlfriend Nu to her house. She suggested they come over to chat and enjoy some milk tea that she would prepare. Fook thought it was a harmless invitation, as Nak seemed to have moved on and treated him as a friend. He invited Nu, who was free from school that day, to join him. Nak was known for her skill in making delicious milk tea, including Thai green and red tea. When Fook and Nu arrived at Nak's house, she had already prepared a pot of fragrant milk tea. The 3 of them drank the tea and chatted casually before leaving. Afterward, Nu returned to school as usual, but a few days later, she started feeling unwell. She experienced unusual symptoms like stomach pain and body aches. Fook took her to the doctor, but the medical examination did not reveal any specific illness. The doctor simply diagnosed her with general fatigue. However, Nu felt extreme discomfort and pain, which puzzled everyone. Concerned, Fook confided in his friend Hung, who suggested they consult a spiritual healer. Hung suspected that Nu might have been cursed or affected by something supernatural. Fook agreed and asked Hung for a recommendation. Hung directed him to a particular healer, but the details of the location were unclear. When they arrived at the healer's place, the healer didn't say much. Just take some chicken eggs, but make sure they are raw eggs, not boiled ones, because in some places they boil the eggs. However, in this particular case, the master used raw eggs. As the master rolled the egg over her body, she writhed in pain. It felt like wherever the egg rolled, her body experienced pinching and intense pain. After the master cracked the egg open, the contents inside were no longer the usual yolk or egg white. Instead, it was a black, viscous liquid. The master sifted through the liquid and found a nail, some hair, and a small piece of a razor blade. When Fook witnessed the master cracking the egg, the smell was unbearable, similar to the foul odor of decayed toenails. After the master opened the egg, he revealed that the person who had cursed the girl was a young woman. He also mentioned that whoever caused such harm to this woman would eventually face the same fate, sooner or later. Once the curse was lifted, everyone was relieved because the girl no longer felt tired or unwell. She resumed her studies, and Fook continued working at the karaoke bar. A few days after the ritual, Fook noticed that Nak, a colleague of his, was looking weak and ill. Nak eventually asked her boss for permission to leave her job to focus on her health. She mentioned feeling unwell and that doctors couldn't diagnose her condition. At that moment, Fook pieced everything together and realized that Nak was the one who had cursed his girlfriend. Nak had feelings for Fook and had confessed her love to him, but he didn't reciprocate. Out of jealousy and resentment toward his girlfriend, Nak resorted to dark magic. On that same day, Nak packed her belongings and returned to her hometown, leaving the karaoke bar for good. Shortly after, Fook heard from acquaintances that Nak had fallen seriously ill, and her survival was uncertain. Fook didn't know the full details, but he firmly believed that Nak had to face the consequences of her actions for bringing such harm to his girlfriend. As of now, Fook's girlfriend has fully recovered, and the two have been happily married for a long time. Another short story involves a young woman who was also harmed by another woman using dark magic. Back in July 2021, this young woman was staying at her sister's house. During her stay, she met a neighbor who frequently visited her sister's home because his child often played there. She started to notice him and eventually developed feelings for him. He liked her too, and they began exchanging messages and eventually started dating. However, she later found out that the man was already married with children. His wife was in prison at the time, but was about to be released. Everything seemed fine until the day his wife returned home. That's when the trouble began. When he was released from prison, his wife visited him to see their child. He mentioned to you that his wife only came to visit their child and would take the child back to Tay Ninh. He assured you she would no longer live with him. When his wife came to visit their child at home, she also knew that her husband was currently in a relationship with you. However, it seemed that the two of them had already divorced, but you didn't make it clear until a few months later. At that time, your behavior changed drastically. You often felt headaches and irritation. It escalated to the point where you and him argued a lot. Angry, you left and went back to your mother's home. When you arrived at your mom's house, something suddenly seemed to control you. Upon seeing your mom, you lunged at her and started choking her. You did so violently until your stepfather intervened and pulled you away. You even wanted to hit your stepfather and shouted angrily at him. That's when your family realized something was wrong and decided to take you to a spiritual teacher. The teacher immediately told you that you had been cursed. Specifically, it was a Thien Lin Ko curse. However, the teacher admitted he couldn't remove it because the curse was created by a very powerful sorcerer. He then referred you to another teacher in Samao. When you arrived at the second teacher's place, he asked you to sit down, and as soon as he looked at you, he knew what the problem was. He asked if you often felt pain in your lower abdomen after being intimate with your husband, and if you two had been arguing a lot recently. You confirmed that it was true and asked how he knew. The teacher explained that your husband's ex-wife had cursed you. Even though they were divorced, she couldn't stand seeing you two together. She had created the curse with the help of a skilled sorcerer who was around 60 to 70 years old. The teacher also revealed that the ex-wife had cursed you on the day she visited her child. Before taking the child back to her hometown, she prayed and declared, "I will curse both of you to go mad." She left behind a cursed object to bind the spell on you. Hearing this, you were terrified and covered in goosebumps. The teacher told you to sit cross-legged so he could remove the curse. He examined your back and said it was very dark, a sign of the curse's effects. The teacher performed rituals behind you, so you couldn't see what he was doing. After the ritual, you felt an uncontrollable urge to use the bathroom. What you expelled was described as filthy and abnormal, frightening everyone who witnessed it. The teacher instructed you to stay at his place for 3 days and nights while he continued the rituals. After this period, the curse was completely removed. Indeed, after the sessions, you felt normal again. You and your husband stopped arguing, and all the strange symptoms you had experienced were gone. You mentioned that the teacher in Sam Mao was very skilled, but you've since lost contact with him and don't remember how to find his place. Additionally, you heard that your husband's ex-wife eventually faced retribution. She reportedly experienced constant seizures, but you're unsure of her current condition. And that concludes today's story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you enjoyed this story. Feel free to leave a comment below to share your thoughts. And stay tuned for more fascinating stories. Goodbye for now. Hello everyone. Welcome back to the YouTube channel of Ghost Stories by Uncle Ba Dewey. Wishing everyone an exciting time listening to today's ghost story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel to support Dewey. Thank you all so much. Now, let's dive into today's story. In recent days, Dewey has shared quite a few stories about spiritual attachments. However, the content of each story is entirely different. But have you noticed a common feature in the spiritual attachment stories Dewey has told? They often have a happy ending, either with the spirit being reincarnated or showing affection for the living female character. However, there are also spiritual attachment stories where the spirit only intends to harm the living, dragging them along. This is the case in today's story. This story was shared by a friend's older sister named Yu. At the time of the story, Yu was still very young. She lived with her younger sister, who was in middle school. To describe the area where Yu lived, the neighborhood had a large cemetery, which was located right next to the middle school her younger sister, Thursday, attended. Every day, Yu would drive back and forth to take Thursday to and from school, passing by the cemetery. This cemetery contained many graves, including those of people from the neighborhood, as well as graves of outsiders brought there for burial. There were even nameless graves, those of people who had died in accidents or drowned in the area, with no relatives to claim them. These nameless graves were also buried there. Every year, around the 24th or 25th of the Lunar New Year, locals would visit their family members' graves to clean and maintain them. There were many graves in this cemetery, so during the Lunar New Year, the relatives of the deceased were often busy cleaning their homes and didn't have time to visit and tidy their loved ones' graves. Because of this, Yu's mother had an annual job where the villagers would ask her to clean and maintain the graves of their relatives. She had been doing this work for many years without any issues. However, in 2018, things started to change. In previous years, Ms. Yu was busy with her studies and couldn't assist her mother with the grave cleaning work. But in 2018, she had free time and decided to help her mother at the cemetery. On that day, while cleaning the graves, Ms. Yu noticed a grave on her left-hand side. This grave was built lower than the others, making it look sunken and quite different from the surrounding graves. It was overgrown with plants, making it appear very old and neglected. Out of compassion, Yu decided to clean this grave as well. When she approached the grave, she realized it had been abandoned for a long time. Upon closer inspection, she found a headstone, but it didn't have a name, date of birth, or any identifying information. Only the month and year of death were inscribed. After searching for a while, she found a photograph at the base of the headstone. The image was blurry, but it was clear that it depicted a young man. Feeling curious, Ms. Yu turned to her mother and asked, "Mom, why does this grave look so old and different? There's no name or date of birth on the headstone, just the date of death. It's so strange." Her mother scolded her, saying, "Don't ask too many questions. Just focus on your work and don't meddle in other people's business." Heeding her mother's advice, Ms. Yu continued her work in silence. However, she couldn't shake the feeling that the young man from the photograph was watching her. She felt as though he was observing her every move throughout the day. By the end of the day, the cleaning was complete. Before leaving, Ms. Yu remembered the grave and, out of sympathy, picked some wildflowers growing nearby. She tied them into a small bouquet and placed them in front of the grave as a gesture of respect and compassion. She felt sorry for the young man, who had passed away so young and whose grave seemed to have no visitors or family to care for it. That night, when Ms. Duy went to bed, she had a vivid dream. In her dream, she saw a young man standing at her bedroom door. He was wearing a white shirt, and though his face was unclear, he was holding the bouquet of flowers she had left at the grave earlier that day. That small bouquet of wildflowers. Well, that afternoon when I was standing by the grave, I picked it and placed it in front of the young man's grave. Then, in my dream, I saw him holding that bouquet. But the dream was so hazy and unclear, just a fleeting moment, and I suddenly woke up, startled. At first, I thought it was just a dream, but when I looked at my bedroom door, it was wide open, even though I had closed both the door and the windows tightly before going to bed. I've never had the habit of sleeping with the door open, so I found it very strange. The next morning, I asked my mom if she had come into my room or opened the windows during the night, but she said, "No, why would I go into your room?" So I let it go. The following day, I got busy helping my family prepare for the Lunar New Year, and I forgot all about it. Everything seemed normal until New Year's Eve. That night, I went out with friends to celebrate and then came home to sleep. In my dream that night, I saw the same young man again. I don't know where he came from, but he approached my bed, held my hand, and led me out of the house. We went to so many places together. Strangely, I wasn't scared at all. I actually felt very warm and comforted. The dream felt incredibly long because he took me to so many places and we had such a good time. Eventually, he brought me back to his home, kissed me gently on the forehead, and then left. I watched him walk away, heading toward the cemetery. I want to call out to him to stop him, but my mouth felt frozen. I couldn't say a word. After a while, I finally woke up and was able to move my body again. But I felt dazed because I couldn't stop thinking about that young man. I started to have feelings for him. The next morning, which was the first day of the Lunar New Year, I went to wash my face and brush my teeth. That's when I noticed a red mark on my forehead, exactly where he had kissed me in the dream. It looked like a bruise, and no matter how much I scrubbed, it wouldn't go away. At that moment, I realized I had encountered the spirit of the young man whose grave I had visited. However, since I had developed feelings for him and sensed that he was kind, he only came to take me out and didn't harm me, I decided not to tell anyone about it. From then on, he appeared in my dreams every night, taking me to various places, up to the mountains, down to the sea, and even to crowded areas. The dreams felt so real, like real-life experiences. I started falling in love with him. Every night, I eagerly awaited seeing him again. During the day, I just wanted time to pass quickly so I could fall asleep and meet him in my dreams. Before all this, I used to stay up late at night using my phone, but now I stopped using my phone at night. I would turn it off and go to bed early, hoping to see him. However, everything has two sides. During this time, my family noticed that my habits were changing. During the day, I would seem absent-minded, just waiting for nighttime, and at night, I would go to bed early without touching my phone. My family thought this was a positive change. They assumed I had become more disciplined, so no one said anything and just let me be. To do that, after a long period of seeing his image in her dreams every night, suddenly, for a few days, she no longer saw him appear. This absence made her feel restless, uneasy, and deeply uncomfortable. As the nights passed without his presence, she felt even more agitated. In just a short span of time, she became like a person battling depression, irritable, hot-tempered, and frequently yelling at her family members. She often stood in a daze, staring toward the direction of the cemetery. At night, she couldn't sleep and sat lost in thought, as if she were someone heartbroken. Day by day, this unsettling feeling grew stronger, compelling her to go to the cemetery to find his grave at all costs. Unable to bear it any longer, she secretly made an excuse to her mother, saying she was going to pick up her younger sister earlier than usual. This gave her time to visit the cemetery to search for his grave. That day, she went to pick up little Thursday very early, made a turn toward the cemetery, and stood in front of his grave. She described the feeling as though she had reunited with a lover after years of separation. Overwhelmed, she sat down, hugging and holding onto the grave for a long time. She kept watch until it was nearly time for Thursday to finish school, then let go and went to pick her up. From that day on, she constantly found excuses to pick up Thursday early, just so she could visit his grave. At first, no one knew about her actions. However, one day, by coincidence, when she went to pick up Thursday early and turned toward the cemetery, Thursday was having gym class behind her school. From the back of the schoolyard, one could see through the fence directly to the cemetery. Thursday, while exercising, saw her sister sitting in front of a grave, hugging and kissing the gravestone repeatedly. The sight terrified Thursday, and later that evening, she secretly told their mother about what she had seen. Thursday explained, "This afternoon, I saw Sister Dew sitting by someone's grave, hugging and kissing it. It was so scary I had to tell you." At first, their parents didn't believe Thursday's story. However, after thinking about it, they began to notice changes in Dew's behavior. She had started going to bed early and always picked Thursday up much earlier than necessary, even though Thursday's school dismissed hours later. Suspicious, their parents began to believe Thursday's account but didn't confront Dew immediately. The next day, when Dew was about to leave to pick up Thursday, her parents secretly followed her to see what she was really doing. They even brought along someone with spiritual abilities who could sense the presence of the supernatural. The three of them followed Dew closely and were shocked to discover that instead of heading to the school to pick up Thursday, Dew turned into the cemetery. She stood before the grave, kissed the gravestone, knelt down, and continued to kiss it repeatedly. Her actions left them stunned. Dew's lover always appeared. At this moment, there was a reason behind it. It was said that she was seen standing next to a girl named Dew, and there was a young man standing beside her, gently stroking her hair. At that time, Dew's parents didn't notice anything unusual, but they already knew that Dew was spiritually bound to the soul of a man buried in a nearby grave. After witnessing this scene, someone informed Dew's parents, saying, "Your daughter is spiritually attached to that man's soul. You should immediately find a spiritual master to sever this connection. Take her to the master tomorrow, but don't let her know the real reason. If she finds out, the spirit might prevent her from going." The family decided to act discreetly. They planned to tell Dew that they were going to get traditional herbal medicine rather than visiting a spiritual master. The next day, everything was prepared. However, on the night before they were set to take her to the master, Dew had a dream. In her dream, the man appeared, but unlike before, his face was no longer calm and kind. This time he looked worried, frightened, and angry. He sat down and spoke to her. "Tomorrow, someone is going to take me away. If you don't meet me tonight, you'll never see me again. Come to the riverbank outside your house right now, or it'll be too late." Dew woke up startled, confused about what was happening. However, she felt an uncontrollable urge, as if some force was pushing her to go to the riverbank immediately. Guided as if by an unseen hand, she calmly got up, opened the front door quietly, and walked toward the riverbank near her house. It was a dark night, and she couldn't see anything in the water. Standing there, she heard the man's voice calling out from the river, "Jump in. Jump quickly, and we'll never be apart again. Jump now." At that moment, Dew seemed to lose all sense of reason. She took a few steps forward, her feet sinking into the riverbank mud, and was about to fall into the water. Fortunately, two men fishing nearby noticed her. Realizing she was about to jump into the river, they rushed over and pulled her back to safety. The men shouted loudly, alerting the entire neighborhood. Soon, a crowd gathered, and they brought Dew back home. That night, Dew was in shock and fainted for 3 days. When she finally woke up, she was hysterical, screaming and acting uncontrollably, as if possessed. So, at her house, they took 2 chains and tied her hands and feet to the bed to prevent her from wandering off and doing reckless things. Oh my, you wouldn't believe it. Her eyes were wild and glaring, just like a ferocious beast. Everyone was terrified. At this point, someone decided to find a spiritual master to look into her situation. After inviting the master to the house, he observed everything inside and then went out to the cemetery where a certain grave was located. Following that, he went down to the riverbank, the spot where she had previously attempted to take her own life. The master then informed the family, saying, "This girl is being haunted, not just by a ghost, but by a water demon. The spirit belongs to a man who drowned in this area long ago. The locals retrieved his body and buried him here since he had no family or relatives to claim him. They didn't know his name or age, so they just buried him as a formality. However, because no proper rituals were performed to summon and release his spirit, it remained trapped in the river for too long, eventually turning into a water demon." The master continued, "The girl must have visited his grave and unintentionally formed a connection with him. Now he's following her, waiting for the right moment to pull her under and take her place so he can reincarnate." As the master spoke, several elderly villagers nodded in agreement, recalling a similar incident in the past. They remember a young man's body being washed ashore near their village. Despite reporting it to the police, no relatives came forward. So the body was buried in the cemetery with no proper identification, just a hastily drawn portrait placed on the grave. The master then warned the family, "This spirit has already turned into a demon, so I can't guarantee I'll be able to exorcise it. But I'll try. Tonight, at 3 a.m., I'll go to the riverbank to perform the ritual. Make sure the girl doesn't step out of the house tonight, not even for a moment. If she does and the demon possesses her, it will drive her to harm herself, and I won't be able to help her then." The family followed the master's instructions carefully. That night, the villagers split into two groups. One stayed at the house to guard the girl, ensuring she didn't leave, while the other accompanied the master to the riverbank to witness the ritual. At the river, the master began chanting and praying. He burned some talismans, turned the ashes into powder, and scattered them along the riverbank. He had also prepared a wooden bridge for the ritual. From the shore down to the water's edge, the staircase was small. The master set it up leading down there. And on the shore, he prepared a tray of offerings. On the tray, there was a golden bead string. After arranging the offerings, the master began chanting in a language no one understood. Once he finished praying, everyone noticed the wooden staircase leading to the riverbank began shaking violently, as if someone beneath the river was grabbing and shaking it. Meanwhile, the water's surface started rippling gently. Then the wind picked up strongly, swirling from the river and creating an intense chill. The louder the master chanted, the more violently the staircase shook and the stronger the wind became. Afterward, the master took a handful of yellow powder from his bag and scattered it over the river. As soon as he did, the wind stopped and the staircase ceased shaking entirely. At that point, the master looked visibly exhausted. He rested for a while before taking the offering tray and pouring everything into the river. Then he burned the wooden staircase and pulled out the golden bead string from his bag. He held the beads, chanting for a while, before putting them away. The master then informed everyone that the spirit had been exorcised and asked to be taken back to the young woman's house. When they returned to the house, they learned that during the ritual, the possessed woman, Du, had been struggling violently, trying to break free from her restraints to reach the river. However, shortly after, she collapsed and fainted. Back at the house, the master gave the family a bead string and instructed them to ensure the girl wore it at all times without losing it. He also advised letting her rest until she woke up, after which he would provide some talismans. These talismans were to be burned and consumed to complete the process. The master explained that the malevolent spirit had been sealed within his bead string and could no longer escape. He intended to take it to the temple for safekeeping. After giving these instructions, the master left without accepting any payment. 3 days later, Ju regained consciousness. Her parents recounted the entire incident to her. She was deeply saddened and disappointed, realizing the spirit had deceived her in an attempt to take her life as a substitute. For Ju, this experience became a haunting memory, one she would carry for the rest of her life. She likened it to being betrayed in love, not by a person, but by a ghost. The next story involves a stray cat found along the roadside. This tale was shared by a woman who recounted her experience. It all began when she and her group of friends were riding their motorbikes. While traveling, she noticed an elderly woman holding a cat by the roadside, preparing to throw it out onto the street so a car could run over and kill this cat. At that moment, after the woman released the cat right in the middle of the road, and with so many cars passing by, another woman, who had a soft spot for animals, said, "How could this woman be so cruel?" So she went out and picked up the cat. However, when the woman who had thrown the cat saw her pick it up, she started yelling at her, saying, "Put that cat down immediately. I needed to be run over and killed by a car." At that point, the kind-hearted woman ignored her, thinking she might be mentally ill or something. The cat looked so pitiful that she decided to take it home and care for it. That kind woman was actually the sister of your boyfriend. When she brought the cat home, your boyfriend liked it too because the cat had very unique eyes. Its eyes were a beautiful green, like emeralds. Its fur was a mix of white and yellow with stripes, making it look like a small albino tiger. It was stunning. However, your boyfriend's mother didn't want to keep the cat because she believed that having a cat in the house would bring bad luck, especially since their family was running a business. Despite this, your boyfriend and his sister loved the cat so much that they decided to keep it anyway. On the first day, nothing unusual happened. But on the second night, while sleeping, your boyfriend's sister had a dream. In her dream, there was a child in her room causing chaos, rummaging through her belongings and making a mess. In her dream, she scolded the child, saying, "Stop it. What are you doing?" As soon as she said that, the child jumped on her and started choking her. Terrified, she cried and asked, "Who are you? Why are you doing this to me? Why are you choking me?" The child then let go, stood in the corner of the room, and said, "I am the cat." At that moment, she woke up drenched in cold sweat, completely terrified. Interestingly, your boyfriend's family had 3 or 4 foo quack dogs. Usually, these dogs would attack cats and even kill them. Cats were generally very afraid of these dogs. However, this particular cat got along very well with your boyfriend's father. It was very attached to him. One day, while he was holding the cat, it suddenly turned and hissed at the foo quack dogs. The dogs were so scared that they backed off and didn't dare come near the cat anymore. But ever since your boyfriend's father started holding the cat regularly, his business began to suffer significant losses. Over 3 or 4 days, he lost tens of millions of dollars. To clarify, these losses were from business failures, not gambling or anything like that. At this point, your boyfriend's sister started to feel uneasy about the cat. She had a friend who was a medium, so she asked him to come and check if there was anything unusual about the cat. When a medium came to their house and saw the cat, he grabbed its front legs and closed his eyes to sense its energy. Everyone stood around watching. Interestingly, when the medium closed his eyes, the cat also closed its eyes. When he opened his eyes, the cat did the same. However, after the examination, the medium said he couldn't sense anything unusual about the cat. It felt like there was some kind of force preventing him from continuing to explore the cat. All he could see were its green eyes. After that, even though they couldn't figure out anything else, everyone decided to put the cat into a black plastic bag and take it to an empty piece of land to leave it there. They were afraid it might remember the way back home, so they put it in the black plastic bag to ensure it wouldn't. Then, they took it to a completely barren piece of land with no trees or anything around. As soon as they released it and drove away, they turned back to look after just a short distance, but the cat had completely disappeared, even though they had just released it in the middle of an open field. And if it had run, they would have been able to see it. It vanished within a minute or two. After releasing the cat, the strange dreams stopped, and the father's business no longer suffered losses. It was very peculiar, and they wondered if this was some kind of supernatural phenomenon. The next story happened in Baklou. You mentioned hearing this story from your older sister when you were about 5 years old. It all began one day when your cousin came to visit and brought along a large white teddy bear, as big as a child, for you to play with. When asked where he got such a beautiful teddy bear, he said he found it in a second-hand shop and thought it was cute, so he bought it for you. He brought it inside, gave it to you, and you played with it while your sister sat beside you. Even though you were only about 5 years old, you still vividly remember feeling as if someone was always watching your actions while you played. The next day, during your afternoon nap on a hammock, you suddenly felt the hammock begin to sway gently, then more strongly, to the point that you almost fell off. Startled, you woke up and saw a dark-skinned boy, around 9 or 10 years old, standing at the head of the hammock. A few days later, your sister said you started sleeping excessively and wouldn't wake up easily. During this time, you became abnormally attached to the teddy bear, refusing to let anyone touch it. If someone tried to take it, you would react aggressively, almost as if you wanted to attack them. You would sit and play alone, talking to yourself in a strange manner. Seeing this, your grandmother suspected you were possessed. She and your grandfather decided to take you to see a spiritual healer. However, you refused to go and clung tightly to the teddy bear. They tried to coax you by saying they were taking you out for fun, and after much persuasion, you finally agreed. When they arrived at the healer's house, the healer immediately knew something was wrong. Your older sister, curious, stood outside watching to see what the healer would do. That day, everyone witnessed something extraordinary. When you went to your teacher's house, you brought along that stuffed bear. Upon arriving, the teacher noticed the bear and asked, "Who are you, and why are you following this child?" At that moment, your older sister, who was standing outside, explained. She said that suddenly you started speaking in an adult's voice, saying, "I was struck by lightning and died behind this house. I found this child adorable, so I decided to follow her. Can I play with her?" The teacher, understanding the situation, gently said, "Please leave. Let this child be. She's still young. Don't possess her." However, you refused, responding, "I won't leave. I'll stay here forever. If you try to force me out, I'll break this child's neck." When the spirit refused to leave, the teacher placed a talisman on your forehead, and you immediately fainted. After that, the spirit transferred to your male cousin. Your sister described the scene as terrifying. His eyes rolled back, and his tongue stuck out. He began speaking in a strange language, not Vietnamese, but something that seemed otherworldly. The teacher and the spirit started communicating and eventually engaged in a spiritual battle. The fight was intense, and the teacher became very exhausted. Finally, the teacher declared victory, saying he had subdued the spirit and trapped it inside the stuffed bear. He then asked for permission to take the bear to the temple. Afterward, the teacher gave you a brown beaded bracelet and a small brown basket, explaining that it was a protective charm. He instructed you to hang it in front of your room as a safeguard in case the spirit tried to return. Since then, over 10 years have passed, and you haven't encountered that spirit again. The talisman, the small basket, is still hanging at the entrance of your room. And that concludes today's story. Before we end, don't forget to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel to support Duy. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to leave a comment below to share your thoughts. Stay tuned for more fascinating stories to come. Goodbye, everyone.